To commit to something, to take responsibility, to embrace it as your own, creating a bond of honor, wanting to see through those things to which we pledge our word. This is the idea of commitment or compromise. This is the idea of commitment or compromise. We live in a time where this is heavily stigmatized, seen negatively, as something that results in a loss of freedom. Shall we think a little about this concept? Let's see if we can reach some conclusion that might clarify what commitment truly is. Why was commitment considered, in times past, as one of the most precious virtues of a human being, to the point where it was necessary for a human being to be committed, to be a responsible person, a person of their word, for someone to accept them, for example, as a friend or as a worker, in their endeavor? This was once considered in such a way as vital that it was almost like a badge of an honorable man. And today, it is often looked upon with disfavor. We will not discuss a lot about what caused these values to become so diminished, but let's leave it to you, so you can reflect on it yourself. Well, in philosophy, we often examine the origin of words. Let me explain why that is. Words, when they were born, were created to meet a need. And sometimes they become hollow over the generations, over the centuries, in such a way that we no longer know what it means. So we end up with empty words, talking about things we do not fully understand. Etymology takes us back to the moment when the word was born and tells us to uncover what kind of reality this word was born to describe. And it gives us a much deeper understanding of what this concept is meant to serve. So, commitment or compromise has the Latin root compromissus, from the past participle comprometer, which means to make a mutual promise. That is, with more promiser, promise together. In other words, a promise, a mutual expectation. And as I was telling you, in times past, it was an indicator for you to have a friend. It means that you could count on giving your best and receiving the best from the other person. To count on that what you dedicated to this person would be reciprocated equally, meaning there would be no breaches of trust, no lapses in responsibility. Therefore, it is an interesting factor that we will see in this etymology. The mutual promise, the trust, then you realize that these things honor trust, dignity, the establishment of bonds among men. It was strongly associated with the idea of commitment. And today, we do not really have that connection anymore. What are friendships today? We would need to give a lecture just to talk about this concept. But we'll see that sometimes they are more of a temporary, fleeting camaraderie rather than a deep bond, where one is a contributing factor in the life of the other. This idea of commitment is really missing. It is interesting. Just a little while ago, I was talking with a friend, and she was telling me, when we invent a word, it starts gaining power in our lives. Soon you see, I don't know. Sometimes it is very trendy to think of a new disease. And when we invent a name for it, soon enough, it is full of people claiming to be affected. Have you ever noticed how curious this is? Things that 20 years ago, those from my generation did not even know about. Never at any point in your life. Today, it is everywhere. It seems like inventing a new disease every season is a very current trend in our days. So, when you have a word that holds its meaning, it becomes much easier to live it. When words become empty, as Plato said, they empty out, and one finds more pleasure in the arts, which is the transmission of knowledge. And it also makes the value that this word carries becomes increasingly rare. And today, this is a word whose value has become increasingly rare. And many times, this value is inverted. It is seen as someone who is a slave to something. A committed man is a man who is a slave to something, not free. Is it really like that? Is it really commitment that enslaves? Let's think a little about this. Well, to promise, then the mutual promise. The first thing we should consider is, to whom do we make our first mutual promise? In other words, what is our first commitment? And without a doubt, it is with ourselves. Our first commitment is to honor our human condition. This human essence that exists within us has to shine through, has to leave traces. We came into the world to fulfill our human condition and, through our example, help others to also follow this path. In other words, we came to be a factor of addition for ourselves and for the world. The first commitment is between our essence and our appearance, or between being and existing, whichever you prefer. We are committed to serving what we most intimately are. We are human beings. In other words, humanism is an essential value for us because a man who does not practice, who does not live humanism, is like a plant that refuses to perform photosynthesis or an animal that refuses to follow its instincts. He is not truly a man, he is half a man. And what nature expects from him is exactly what he does not do. So, the first commitment we have with ourselves is the commitment to know and honor our human identity. When we miss a commitment, sometimes people think, I left so and so hanging. I caused him harm, he will not forgive me. That is right, it probably happened. But the ones who suffer the most from our lack of commitment, without a doubt, are ourselves. Have you ever stopped to evaluate this situation? So-and-so is counting on you to get some work done, and you didn't show up. Just between us, for one day he might get upset. But no one is irreplaceable. Tomorrow, he might find another professional, maybe even better than you. Tomorrow, he will find someone else to help him with that, who knows. Whatever commitment you had. But probably he will have a replacement in the very short term. Now, who can never be replaced? It is you for yourself. He can count on other people, but you cannot stop counting on yourself. You cannot give up on yourself. Therefore, you are the one most harmed, because by constantly neglecting your commitments, by repeatedly betraying your dedication, do you know what will happen? You lose all trust in yourself. And trust is the foundation from which we will move into the future. Pay attention to this, because losing confidence in yourself is something incredibly difficult to regain, to correct, to reclaim. When you say something that seems trivial, like, for example, I am going to start a diet on Monday. Look, don't speak if you don't want to take it seriously. Because if you always make commitments to yourself, even with things you do not follow through on, the next time you want to make an important commitment, vital for your growth, your own conscience will say, here you go again with this. You keep saying things and does nothing. Do you think I will fall for that? I know that tomorrow you will forget about it, you won't do anything. Do you realize that you end up without a support base to leverage the future? You end up without credibility in the eyes of your own potential, in the eyes of your own conscience, and you will probably have a lot of difficulty growing. You will have to work really hard to regain that. So, the most harmed one, when we fail to meet our commitments, it is ourselves. Others can replace us. We cannot replace ourselves in our own lives. That is impossible. Therefore, making our word honorable and trustworthy is a matter of survival, of life as human beings. Otherwise, we are doomed to remain confined in this moral, mental, and psychological state we are in at this moment. There is no possibility for growth. Not when you lose the ground, the foundation where you rely on to leverage into the future. Well, what about the topic of losing freedom? How does that work? Has a committed person really lost their freedom? Imagine that. I had a very simple equation, a line. And on this line, I were to represent for you the human trajectory. I think I'm going to say something that few will disagree with, because it is obvious, it is a truism, as they say in philosophy, that every human being came into the world to move from ignorance to wisdom. A wisdom that allows you to respond better to life, to respond as a human being, to meet your needs and the world's needs as a human being. So, we reach a certain level of ignorance, and we can reach a certain level of wisdom. This is the human journey. If you keep this in mind, you will realize that every time you work on your own improvement as a human being and consequently contribute to the improvement of those around you, you are finding meaning. You are contributing to what you are called to by nature. You are contributing to your human nature. If you're adrift, just serving anything or absolutely nothing at all, you end up being a slave to circumstances that weren't suitable for your moment. It is as if, now, imagine this to make the idea clearer. A leaf attached to a branch, it has a commitment to this plant. Through this leaf, you should know, it acts like a solar ray receptor cell, and it is from this reception that the leaf performs that photosynthesis occurs in the plant. It is also through the broadening of pores of this leaf that also receive carbon dioxide and facilitate the gas exchange with the environment. Therefore, this leaf has a vital role in the life of the plant. If this leaf detaches, it goes and starts to be a plaything in the hands of the wind. Is it truly freer? Which leaf is freer? The one that serves the body it belongs to, or the leaf that is a slave to the wind and goes wherever the wind takes it? A being without identity, a being that does not fulfill what the body it belongs to needs, is a plaything in the hands of circumstances. Imagine that in our human body, we can perceive this very clearly. A cell that serves the whole is a healthy cell, a cell that enters an alternative scheme and thinks only of itself, that is a cancerous cell. And we know the danger that this poses to itself and to the whole. So, we must understand that the leaf attached to the tree, which is its commitment, is the reason it came into the world. It is why it exists. Attached to the tree, fulfilling its purpose, it is much freer than a leaf that becomes a plaything in the hands of the wind. It goes wherever the wind blows. And so it is with all beings. The greatest freedom we can have is precisely the freedom to fulfill ourselves in what we truly are. Each being finds fulfillment and happiness in what it is. Plants being plants, animals being animals, and human beings being human. In other words, by realizing human values. In the same way that the plant fulfills its vegetal values, doing what corresponds to it. And one of the fundamental values is precisely the ability to commit, to dedicate oneself, to take responsibility for something, including starting with oneself, taking responsibility to leave here a little greater than when you arrived, and make your life have an extra touch, make a difference, be a factor of addition. So, it is important for us to realize this. The one who fulfills their nature is much freer than the one who becomes alienated and is dragged along, not even knowing by what kind of nature, nor where to. There is an example I usually give, which I find interesting. Imagine that life is like a journey. It is a bit of a cliche, but we can put it that way, and you are driving a car, which is your body here. You have two possibilities for making this journey. One, at the wheel, clear-headed, eyes open, choosing where you want to go. Or in the back seat, blindfolded, being driven by someone you do not even know, nor where they are taking you. The person who does not take the reins of his vehicle and lacks a clear sense of direction is a slave to things he does not know, nor whom they serve. Because standing still, no one is. If you do not take the reins of your life and do not anchor yourself to the tree that corresponds to you, in other words, if you do not commit to what you believe in, you will unconsciously be committing to goals that you might not want to know about. Standing still, we are not. Life does not allow for complete paralysis. We are always in motion. You choose, either take the reins or hand them over to someone else. So, life is sustained around commitment, a deep commitment to its laws, which our physical body follows rigorously. The heart does not take breaks. The peristaltic rhythms of the intestines, the rhythm of breathing, all of this knows there must be rhythm. There must be a continuous functioning. There are no breaks, no counter-rhythms, no intervals, because life cannot sustain itself. And there is also a rhythm in the metaphysical realm of building knowledge and possessing those values that characterize us as human beings. Knowledge, possession, and practice. And this makes us commit to human nature. While our body is solely and only committed to survival, we consciously commit by heart to true life with all human beings. For those who have watched that beautiful movie called Braveheart, the protagonist said a very interesting phrase. All men die, but not all men truly live. Some merely survive. And this is the man who is unable to commit to human values and grow in relation to them. Something very interesting for us to ponder, which also serves as another argument for this issue of freedom. Imagine a company. On one side, you have the company president, who is the largest shareholder, a person whose entire life is dedicated to that enterprise. So if it fails, he goes down with it. His entire life goes into a loop. If that enterprise fails, therefore, his commitment to the enterprise is absolute. Since he has a total commitment, there is nothing in this company that is off limits to him. He can know all the documents, he can know and have all internal knowledge. He has full access to every sector of that enterprise, meaning he is freer because he is more committed. Now, imagine yourself an employee who just joined, or an intern who has that job but is already thinking about the next one, just passing through to gain some experience, not even understanding what the company truly does. Plays a very limited role, does not understand, nor is interested in understanding. It is evident that his commitment is minimal. If that company goes bankrupt, he quickly moves on and finds another job, and it does not make a big difference in his life. In other words, since the commitment is very small, the freedom is very small. An intern or a very new employee cannot expect to read the company's documents or delve into all the sectors and get to know how everything works. There is a limit to the information he has access to. Very limited, by the way, because small commitment, small freedom. There are so many obvious things around us, folks, that sometimes it amazes me. How can we believe in certain things that are presented as dogmas, as cultural products that are thrown at us? How can we swallow this passively? When we take a minute to observe the laws of nature, we realize that this is not how it works. There are many, many cases where we become blind and believe in absurdities. If we just paused for a moment, trusted ourselves, and looked at the nature around us, both general nature and human nature, we would realize that it's not like that. That's not how it works. In other words, it is the price of complacency in its worst aspect, which is mental complacency. That does not let us grow. Plato, in a dialogue called The Republic, spoke of something very interesting within the allegory of the cave. A small detail of the allegory of the cave. He said that the wise person was the one who, upon leaving the cave, saw things illuminated by the light of the sun. Well, what does it mean to see things illuminated by the light of the sun? It is a symbol. And then he explains, the sunlight is the idea of the good. The one who sees things illuminated by the idea of the good sees the fullness of things and, therefore, is a wise person. What can we understand from this? Imagine that I look at things illuminated by a low-powered flashlight. I will see a fragment of things. I won't see them in their entirety. And that fragment is what interests me about things. When I illuminate, when I commit to the idea of the good, that is, human kindness, being a factor of addition, when I commit to this idea, I look at things and see them in their entirety. Do you know why? Because I do not want to manipulate them. I do not want to use them. I want to know how I can act in such a way that I benefit this thing. I have no other intention but to benefit it. Imagine that you need to vent to a friend. You won't look for a self-interested person who might manipulate what you say for their own benefit. You will look for someone who cares about you so much, who is so committed to your well-being that you know you can speak. And that won't be misused. Isn't that it? You only open up to someone who wants nothing but your well-being. Do we think that nature does not know this? That nature is devoid of intelligence? Only the one who approaches it, wanting to be a factor of addition for its growth, that is, the one who is committed to the good, only before this person does it open up and show its heart. And this person sees the heart of all things and thus becomes wise. But why? Because their disposition was to add, not to subtract. To help all things find the good that is inherent to them, and not take from them everything that might interest you. Things become an end in themselves and not merely means for my personal whims. Why, then, according to Plato, does a man become wise? Because he is committed to an idea, which is the idea of the good. In other words, it is commitment that will lift us from ignorance to wisdom. Do you see how classic this is? There's a passage I really like from Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology. He conducted a series of studies on the unconscious, on the subconscious, and he once said that during one of his deep dives to better understand the human unconscious, he realized that the only thing that brought him back to himself, that kept him from getting lost there, from going mad, was commitment, the commitment he had to his family, to his patients, with the people he intended to help in the future. In other words, commitment rescued him from madness. If he did not commit to anything, he would not have a rope to cling to and pull himself out of there, back to lucidity. There are so many cases like this within various disciplines that provide us with numerous examples. Commitment has always been a way of rescue from chaos, from manipulation. It has always been a way for humans to ensure that they advance, that their actions add up in a single direction. The loss of freedom is sometimes characterized by a phrase we often hear people say, "I am free, I do not commit to anything." When someone tells me, "I do not commit to anything," I already think, this is the worst kind of slave, committed to alienation. Because alienation is a demanding master. It does not allow him to build anything. It does not let him add up in the same direction for 3 days in a row. It does not allow anything solid and upright to be erected. Anyone who thinks they can live a life without committing to anything has abandoned, as we said before, the chance to consciously commit to what they believe in. He remains committed to 1,000 other things, which he doesn't even know what they are. Not committing to anything, under only one circumstance, if you are dead. If you are alive, you're committed to something, consciously or unconsciously. Continuing, another example that is also very interesting, and one I use a lot in the classroom, I hope this makes it clearer for you, is the example of the castaway. Imagine a person adrift in the middle of the tide, in the middle of the ocean. Far away, there is an island. But he tries to swim there and can't because he is tossed around by the tide. Now, imagine that on this island, someone ties a rope very securely, and that rope floats in the ocean with the end near the castaway, in such a way that he can grab the end of this rope and slowly pull himself along, according to his breath, his possibilities, until he reaches solid ground. He is no longer a plaything in the hands of the tides. He now has a direction, he has a path. Let's try to imagine this symbolically, as if this island, solid ground, were wisdom. The man who is adrift, tossed back and forth by the tides, is ignorance. It is our ignorance that makes us a plaything in the hands of circumstances, of ill-intentioned people, of life's pressures to alienate us, pressures in life that lead us to complacency. And even for our inner desires, for complacency, alienation, comfort, the path of least resistance. All of this tries to toss us from one side to the other. But you have a rope that hangs very close to you. This rope is neither ignorance nor wisdom, but it is a path that, if you commit to it, you never let go, and you pull yourself along without haste and without pause. One day, it will lead you to wisdom. And this rope, which we often call philosophy, the love of wisdom, can only do something for you if you commit to it. At any moment, if you let go of this rope, you become a plaything in the hands of circumstances again. So, you have wisdom over there, ignorance here, and this rope of commitment. If you never let it go, it can rescue you from where you are. Without commitment, without dedication, we are a leaf in the wind, a castaway in the open ocean, a plaything of the tides, the winds, whatever it may be. These factors, both external and internal, that we are left without the strength to fight against them, without identity. It is another important thing for you to understand. The construction and the forming of identity is, in itself, a commitment. And this identity is built by two factors, which is where I want to reach, that is your island, and where I am now, so we do not fall into what Jung called the inflation of the ego. I am at a kilometer from the island, but I think I'm 100 meters. Knowing where I am now and where I want to go is the equation for building your identity. In other words, having an ideal with which you commit yourself. If you say, for example, I want to be more humane, more just, more fraternal. Then commit to that. Recognize the distance you are from it, but make a commitment to this idea. You will pull on this rope, and one day you will get there. And do not think I am rambling, because we are discussing commitment, especially in relation to work. No, the commitment to work, the commitment to family, the commitment to friendships, all of them stem from the commitment to our own conscience and to our life as a whole. Do not imagine that a person who does not commit to their conscience and lacks a clear sense of life. Of course, they have no love for the human condition, no identity. You will commit in a specific context. She will not commit. She acts as long as she believes it is, in some way, rewarding for some personal interest. That idea we used to have in the past, at least I had in my grandparents' generation, of pulling out a mustache hair. I give here my word. And my word is worth more than any guarantee, more valuable than any promissory note. You realize that this person, who would give a strand of their mustache as a guarantee, believed that everything that was a part of them, part of their body, was a guarantee of their word, of commitment, of responsibility. This is a profound dignity. This concept of dignity, which could also be the subject of another lecture, is the result of the commitment you have with yourself. If you are committed to your life as a human being, everything else will be given to you as well, as the biblical text says. This human being will be committed at work, with family, in any circumstance. But the first thing is to commit to your human nature. Commit to the values that define you as a human being. Commit to dignity. Well, some virtues related to commitment. Respect for yourself and others. I find it very difficult for you to respect yourself if you do not see yourself as a dignified human being. If you don't see yourself as a human being who deserves esteem, who deserves trust, you do not respect yourself. Then become a person with a very diminished, very clouded sense of self, and this lack of self-confidence makes them also distrust others. If there is a lack of self-love, it also makes him incapable of deeply loving anyone else. Because nature has a relationship of parallelism. Whoever is profound in everything they express. Whoever is shallow in everything they express. So, the first thing is respect. Immanuel Kant talks about respect in his groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. He returns to the etymology respiter. To look once more, that is, to look more deeply at others, at oneself, to seek the essence of things. One respects oneself when they look deeply within and like what they see. They like their inner nature, have a certain pride in themselves. A wholesome pride to be a dignified human being, to be at peace with their conscience, to leave a human mark on the world. This is a foundation of human self-esteem, a foundation of identity. And commitment, the right kind of commitment, is one of the sources that generate this self-respect. Therefore, commitment and respect are closely connected. A person who does not commit, who does not take responsibility, technically, we could call them irresponsible. And it's very difficult to respect an irresponsible person. Notice that irresponsible and uncommitted are synonyms. But one we consider negative and the other is sometimes seen as positive. Is a free man uncommitted? Perhaps no man is, no human being is. Those who do not commit to the human condition cannot even legitimately claim the status of being human. Self-control. That is, well realize that we have a series of calls in all directions. At this moment, those who are listening to me must have 1,000 thoughts competing with what I am saying. We are constantly receiving offers of things to think about, things to feel, things to do. If you have a deep commitment to your identity, your ideal of life, you can make the right choice amidst all these offers. I will give you an example, quite silly, very simple, but it makes it easier to understand. I commit to being a more just and more integral person. Every time someone offers me something, I already have a reference point to measure if it's good or bad. Does what you are offering me as an activity, as a thought, as a feeling, help me take a step towards my human ideal? No, it does not. It takes me away from my ideal, or even pulls me backward. So that is bad. Does what you are trying to influence me with, this thought, this feeling, help me move towards this human ideal? No. So for me, that is not appropriate. When a person knows where they want to go, they can even notice when they are out of touch with themselves. What does it mean to be out of touch with oneself? When the extension of your actions leads you in a direction that is not aligned with your identity. Therefore, it is difficult to manipulate a person like that. Anything that is offered to you, you have a reference to measure. You are capable of discernment. You are capable of developing intelligence. Once again, diving into etymology. Intelligence comes from intelliger, to choose among, to select the good grain, to choose among all the offers life presented to you. In thought, in feeling, the thoughts passing through your mind at this moment, the feelings, choose the most suitable ones to help you grow. And do you know what the greatest intelligence is? To choose among the things the world proposes who you truly are. The greatest intelligence is identity. So, fixing on establishing a commitment will give us a much greater possibility of self-control, of responding to these external pressures, of being able to choose things with a degree of awareness and responsibility. Clarity and attention. This is also a virtue closely related. We are tremendously scattered, and our decisions are practically pushed by circumstances. A committed person must choose the right things for their commitment to be successfully fulfilled. So they are clear-minded and attentive to life's opportunities. We are living in a time in history, without a doubt, with the highest degree of dispersion. People live divided, always fantasizing about things that, if they were real, they might actually despise. They live running away from their own lives. One of the great dramas of this quarantine. The one we were living, that people were at home, afraid of facing themselves, because they make their lives an escape from themselves. So all this dispersion, all this escape, all this distraction to avoid looking at our lives, to avoid looking at ourselves, is terrible. From the perspective of honoring a commitment, that is why those who are distracted do not like to commit. Therefore, clarity and attention are also virtues that go hand in hand with commitment. We need to be more clear-minded. We need to be more attentive to the multiple opportunities and lessons that life offers us every day. Commitment also helps us with this. We need to land in life. Certainly, our fantasies are not better than life. Give life a chance to show you what it has in store for you. Commitment is a powerful ally in this. Dignity, willpower, and determination are also elements obviously linked to commitment. Where there's a will, there's a way. That is, once you commit, you'll find the means to get there. There is no other way. You will develop your creativity, your imagination, and you will find a way to get there. This is the channeling of will. In fact, if we stop to think about the three great human virtues, which, according to Platonic tradition, unfold from them. All the others are will, love, and intelligence. The three, they walk alongside commitment. Once I am committed to something, I channel willpower. Once I'm committed to something, I have a genuine love. To the point where I can approach someone and say, no matter what happens, as long as I am alive, count on me. What does that mean? Committing to someone, that is the foundation of true love. If not, it is just a fleeting passion. And when circumstances change, that person is no longer as important and moves to the periphery of our lives. And intelligence, as we've already mentioned, is fundamental. I have a reference for choice, which allows me to discern, and this is the foundation of intelligence. And this reference is given to my commitment. So, all the fundamental attributes of a human being are connected to it. To have this rope that connects to our ideal, that connects us to solid ground. So dignity, willpower, determination is that. By the way, an interesting thing, if we look at the etymology of the word courage, it is said to come from cor, meaning heart. Imagine that ahead there's your child who needs you, and there are a bunch of obstacles in the way. There's no way you won't go. Your heart has already gone. It is already there with your child. And now, will the body overcome all obstacles? Why? You have a deep commitment to this being. And this will give you all the willpower needed to overcome every obstacle. Plato, in one of his dialogues, the Acropolis, said that heroism also came from there, from eros, love. I overcome obstacles to save what I am committed to. Whether it be love, will, or intelligence, they would all be related to the idea of commitment. Commitment, then, does not take away our freedom. On the contrary, it liberates us from mediocrity. It pulls us above mere survival. Kant used to say that a man either opens himself up to the appeals of mere survival, and he completely closes himself off to human values, or he does the opposite. He opens himself up to human values, and down here, he closes off, becomes much less manipulable by the environment, master of himself, capable of writing his own story. Because where he is receiving his identity from is not the circumstances, it is from this set, this toolbox that was given to us, which are the human values that characterize us as human beings. Committing to this rescues us from being a plaything in the hands of the world's circumstances. One of the things I found curious during this quarantine is that when people are told to build a new routine within their homes, they feel lost. They do not know how to build a routine because they have never constructed their own routine. The routine was built by needs and pressures, and they were being moved like a billiard ball pushed by a cue. They do not know how to build a routine for their own lives. They were used to being a passive pole of circumstances that kept pushing them. Commitment to the human condition protects you from this kind of thing. It ensures you rise above the circumstances. It ensures fidelity to yourself. Well, there is a quote by Carlos Drummond de Andrade that is quite interesting, although I am going to interpret it in the opposite way of how it is usually done, but I found it quite fitting for. Wrap up our discussion. Going to the theater is like going to life without committing. It is interesting. He says that theater is like a life in which you are not committed. You don't suffer anything, you do not have anything. You just sit there watching. And it seems that people take this seriously because they behave in relation to their own lives as if they were a spectator in the theater. Always a spectator, never the protagonist. They are never on the stage, always in the arena, seeing what the circumstances demand, without any protagonism, without taking the reins of your life at any moment. It is okay to take a break from life every now and then, go to a theater, and watch life on stage while you sit in the audience. But spending your entire life in the audience of your own life is a bit too much. Those who do not commit don't step onto the stage, do not take the lead in their own lives. And at the end of their life, they will tell a story about what was done to them, not about what they themselves did. Have you ever heard people like that? I remember once I was in line at a bank and there were two people talking in those terms. I really wanted to take that trip in my youth, but it did not happen because my father wanted me to study. Then later, I really wanted to take a certain course, but it did not happen because I got a job that required something else. Then, within that job, I really wanted to develop in a certain area, but it did not happen because my boss did not want it. Then my wife did not want it, and later my kids did not want it. Be the story of this person. It was the story of what was done to her throughout her life. At no moment protagonism, at no moment was she on the stage. She was always in the audience. And that is curious. It is curious that we consider this as good and desirable. A whole life being lived and not living. Surviving and not living. And finally, an interesting phrase that I would like to leave with you as a closing thought, which is the following. Commitment is like casting an anchor into the future we aspire to and pulling it steadily, without haste and without pause. Casting an anchor into the future you aspire to and pulling that rope with rhythm, without haste and without pause. Rhythm is the secret of life. In other words, to commit is to build oneself as a human being. And if you are a builder of yourself, you will be a builder in all the things you participate in. There is also a philosophical maxim that I find very interesting, which says, throughout history, There have always been pyramid builders and pyramid destroyers. Choose which group you want to belong to. There are many people ready to demolish. It is important we become builders. And the idea of building a human being and creating positiveness in all who participate in our lives. It is a great and very noble commitment. I hope you can reflect on all of this and understand the human value of commitment and your life as a wholly as a complete thing. And, for all particular cases, employment, family, social relationships, intellectual life. Everything you dedicate yourself to. Without commitment, you do not get anywhere. You do not tread on real time, as the Greeks used to say. Real time is measured by moving towards the human ideal. Without commitment, we don't enter real time. We live in a time of the clock where only biology fulfills its role. We age, but the psychological, moral, and spiritual part of a person remains frozen at the same point. In other words, that is not really living. That is what I would like to convey, and I hope it provides a good reflection for you all. Thank you very much.